We will get started shortly as our participants continue logging in. Hello and welcome to today's Policy Connection, the Workforce Reset, Labor Shortages and the Future of Our Economy. I'm John Mukenya, Senior Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at Sustainable Pittsburgh. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and these materials will be shared after today's program. Please submit any questions via the Q&A box and we'll answer at the end. Feel free to enter your name and organization into the chat so that everyone knows who's in attendance. As always, we strive to create a welcoming environment for all participants and encourage everyone to engage with respect and courtesy. Constructive discussions and diverse perspectives are valued, and we ask that all interactions remain professional and considerate. By participating in this webinar, you are helping to foster a positive experience where everyone can learn and contribute meaningfully. Next slide, please. At Sustainable Pittsburgh, our mission is to empower decision-making that builds a fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and prosperous region. We are doing that through connecting our stakeholders and networks we host, such as the Policy Connection series, to share knowledge of sustainability through resources and experiences to help make a region where all people may succeed. Sustainable Pittsburgh is committed to building the knowledge, perspective, and ability needed to create a better tomorrow for our region. We're optimistic, having worked with nearly 1,000 businesses, communities, and organizations, take action using our customized frameworks to track progress and simultaneously advance social equity, environmental stewardship, and prosperity. The strategic networks we host leverage the collective expertise and diverse perspectives within our region to ensure our communities can meet our challenges today and thrive into the future. That is why we invited you all today to attend as part of our Policy Connection to learn together so that we can act together. And together is how we co-create a fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and prosperous region. Next slide, please. We would like to thank our silver sponsors, Duquesne Light, Live-In Furniture, and Pitt, Ohio, for their support of Sustainable Pittsburgh to make programs like this possible. And we'd also like to extend our gratitude to our bronze and partner sponsors for their ongoing support. For our agenda today, we'll get into an introduction on today's topic, then jump into our speaker panel. First, we'll hear from Dr. Patrick Funk, partner at Valdos Consulting, who will provide a data-driven perspective on labor market trends, workforce systems, and the structural forces shaping labor supply and demand. Second, we'll hear from Brandy Merriweather, president of the Buffalo Urban Development Corporation, who will share a community case study on how Buffalo has navigated economic transition, population change, and workforce development. Third, we'll hear from Anna Yoakum, Director of Workforce Development for the Western PA chapter of NECA, who will speak to local workforce pipeline development, industry partnerships, and efforts to build awareness and pathways into the skilled trades. Lastly, we'll come back around for a Q&A session with all of our speakers. As a reminder, please use the Q&A box for any questions you may have. Next slide, please. We're excited to have you all join us for today's discussion titled The Workforce Reset, Labor Shortages and the Future of Our Economy. Across southwestern Pennsylvania and in many regions across the country, workforce shortages are becoming one of the defining challenges for economic growth, community stability, and long-term resilience. What we're seeing is a broader shift shaped by population decline, an aging demographic, and changing labor dynamics. These trends are affecting nearly every sector, from construction and manufacturing to healthcare, food systems, and education, and are increasingly influencing whether communities can sustain essential services, support local businesses, and attract investment. In many cases, the question is no longer simply whether jobs are available, but whether communities have the workforce needed to support their economies over time. At the same time, there is an active and evolving conversation about how to respond. Across the region and beyond, communities, employers, and workforce systems are exploring new approaches to strengthening talent pipelines, improving workforce participation, and aligning training with industry needs. These efforts raise important questions about how we connect education and workforce systems, how we engage underrepresented and underutilized populations, and how we ensure that economic opportunity is accessible across communities. At Sustainable Pittsburgh, we approach these challenges through a systems lens. We focus on how economic, social, and institutional factors intersect, and how coordinated strategies across workforce development, economic development, and community planning can help regions adapt and thrive. Today's panel reflects that approach. We'll hear from an academic perspective on the structural forces shaping labor markets, a community case study on how a post-industrial region is navigating population and workforce change, and a local industry perspective on building and strengthening workforce pipelines on the ground. Our goal is to provide context to help frame this issue, highlight emerging strategies, and equip you with the perspectives and questions needed to engage in this conversation within your communities and organization. And with that, let's begin our conversation. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Patrick Fung. Balancing comprehensive technical expertise with leadership across the firm's portfolio, Patrick brings a unique blend of decision science, machine learning, and economic modeling skills to Valdos Consulting. His experience spans from scaling advanced manufacturing efforts in rural settings to executing national workforce supply chains analysis programs. Patrick graduated with a BA in mathematics from the University of Montana and a PhD in engineering and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks so much, Sean. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Valdos Consulting is a small consulting firm that was spun out of a research lab at Carnegie Mellon University. My partner and our CEO is also a professor still at Carnegie Mellon University. So a lot of the work that I'm presenting today will be kind of the bridge between what we do in the research world and what we do sort of in the application world on the consulting side. So we'll talk about a variety of things, but in general, looking at trying to understand these workforce transition pathways and how we meet occupational demand shocks. And I'll talk about a variety of different types of demand shocks that we have seen and that we might likely see in the near future. So in this workforce analysis, what we call at Valdos Consulting the workforce supply chain, what problem are we solving? We're trying to understand what the workforce we have now is and what the workforce we need and how to help that workforce transition from where we are now to where we need. And a big piece of that is what are the skills that we need today and where do those skills exist? And is the supply and the demand co-located? And we talk about skills here. We mean this term really broadly. We measure skills in a lot of different ways, but it's important to look beyond or underneath the occupation level. I think a lot of folks talk about sort of what occupations are required, but really there's a deeper layer to our analysis, I think, that looks at a variety of different skills measures that you'll see the outcomes for later on that give us a little bit more clarity to understand sort of this supply and demand push and pull. So then we also need to understand sort of what are the most commonly, apologies. If you could just go back one slide. Thank you. What are the most commonly missing skills? And is there training to close those skill gaps, either nationally or regionally? And what specific training requirements do we need in order to fill the specific skill gaps that we're looking at? And then to think not about only what skills are needed now, but how do we predict the skills that are needed in the future? And what does the future supply and demand, labor supply and demand here I'm talking about, look like? So our strategy generally is to try and use publicly available data for repeatability and accessibility so that all partners or clients or research organizations can look at the same information and conduct the same analyses in their environment that we've done that I'll present some results for today. Next slide, thank you. So some work that came out of Carnegie Mellon was looking at this question for response to a demand shock in the electric vehicle industry. So on the right hand of this figure, we've got labor demand for battery electric vehicles in green and internal combustion engine vehicles in blue. I think if you all remember the UAW strikes of now about 2.5 years ago, a big piece of the conversation was around the electric vehicle industry and the perception that electric vehicles will require lower labor because there are fewer pieces. And while there are fewer pieces, they're somewhat more complex. And this research has shown that the overall labor required is actually potentially higher in electric vehicles than it is in combustion engine vehicles. That being said, a lot of that labor is in the battery supply chain, not in the end vehicle supply chain or assembly vehicle of the vehicle supply chain. And so what we were trying to understand here in this research was, what are the transition availabilities for incumbent ICEV workers? Can they transition in place to the electric vehicle industry? Can they transition within the industry, stay within automotive, but go from working on combustion engine to electric vehicles? In addition, where are their wage sustaining transition? That's a key question, I think, for all supply and demand gaps in the labor market is to understand sort of where are there opportunities to at least sustain, if not improve, your wage picture within your occupation or between occupations. And then, as I said, the net labor hours are actually look like they'll increase in the battery electric vehicle industry, but they may be in a different place in the sort of supply chain and also a different geographic location for that production. So here's an example of that. We can see that a lot of the battery electric vehicle production is moving from sort of the traditional automotive industry centered around Detroit or the Rust Belt in general to the Southeast. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But in general, some of the big takeaways are that, there's not co-location between the current labor supply and the future labor demand. And this is just one example of an industry where this is the case, but many new technologies, this will be the case for as well. I mean, there's certainly a fervent conversation around data centers right now and the energy production and water use required for them. I think the general consensus is that the skills are not co-located for those particular sites in where they're being proposed or where they're being built at the moment. And so this is across a variety of industries, you see this challenge of co-location, not making a wage transition, a wage sustaining transition for current laborers sort of readily available. And so when we talk about a wage sustaining transition, we try and look at the level of skill similarity between different occupations. And so the horizontal axis on these figures is skill similarity. The vertical axis is the number of jobs that you're qualified for. And then we've got 4 different jobs that show sort of different characteristic behavior that you may see in the job market. So on the lower left-hand quadrant here, we see this curve shows that as you move up in skill similarity, the number of jobs you're qualified for stays relatively high. And so what this tells us is that you are qualified for not only a lot of jobs, but jobs that are very similar, which will require less training on your part or on the part of the business or the organization that you might be transitioning to. And you're likely to be more productive and probably compensated for your skills more adequately when you have more options at your current, the skill similarity between what you do now and what you're transitioning to. In the lower left-hand corner, we see sort of the other extreme of this is that this curve drops off precipitously as you get to higher levels of skill similarity. And that makes some sense as we think about laborers and material movers. There are fewer jobs that they will have the skills currently to do sort of, immediately joining the job floor to be productive. And so they'll really require more either on-the-job training or potentially larger, more long-term training programs to get that labor pool ready to do other types of work within their industry or across industries. And if we look at one particular case study, this is trying to understand for a particular region and a particular set of occupations, how ready is that area to accept new demand? This was looking at two different sites in Columbus and Sherman-Denniston on building new chips manufacturing facilities. So we've got three curves here in blue, purple, and green that show different skill similarity levels. On the y-axis is wages required, and on the x-axis is the regional labor supply. And so what you can see is as you increase the wages, as you increase the wages that you pay individuals, you sort of access more and more of the labor supply. More people are willing to come do that job at a particular similarity level. Unfortunately, we know that for high-tech occupations, there may not be very many people in a particular region that are able to do that from a skill similarity perspective. But what we see in this figure is on the left-hand side that you may be able to access this 50% skill similarity level with your estimated labor demand of 3,000 individuals and do some on-the-job training and maybe some short-term 1-year or 2-year training programs to get a sufficient skill supply in Columbus, Ohio. Now, contrast that with on the right-hand side, this demand of 4,500 people for the facility really can't even be met at the 50% skill similarity level, no matter what you pay the individuals. And so you're going to have to recruit nationally and pay incentives to relocate people, and there will still be an enormous training gap. And so when we think about the context in which we're asking folks to take a new job or take a leap in an occupation, understanding kind of how siting is impacting this labor supply gap is really critical, and getting some quantitative measures on how that's impacting the local community can give us better insight into long-term planning for messaging around occupational transitions, but more importantly, developing programs with the employers in the region that meet the needs of those employers and meet the scale that those employers are trying to meet. So we look at a variety of different skill measures, but as I said in the beginning, we really try and focus on using public data as much as possible. That allows much of our work to be relatively open source, so others can take it and run with it for their particular region. One of those open source data sets that we look at is the Bureau of Labor Statistics in their ONET system has what they call SKAs, which are skills, knowledge, abilities, and work activities. And this is a set of 163 variables for all occupations that show sort of where your current occupation exists in the level and difficulty for a variety of different SKAs, skills, knowledge, abilities, and work activities. And so we can compare these to the candidate occupations that you may transition to and say, if you want to transition from occupation A to occupation B, or in general, if we want a lot of people to make that transition, we're going to say, there's a deficit in this particular example for machine assemblers. There's a deficit in building and construction skills, customer and personal service, operating vehicles and mechanized devices or equipment, and performing general physical activities. So these are places where we see in the labor pool that for the folks that can make a wage-sustaining transition, these are the places where you may want to focus some training, development, or communication. Likewise, we can see sort of the largest deficits and the most commonly deficient SKAs as well in this analysis for looking sort of granularly under the hood at the skills that are required for the current occupation and where folks in that occupation may end up landing. We also look at in different projects sort of the opportunities for diversity and recruitment. So we can look at a pool of individuals based on their skills to try and understand if you need more people with a particular skill set, where are, other than just recruiting from that singular occupation or from other employers who also employ, do similar work to you and employ people like you, are there other industries? Are there other occupations that have similar skills but may not be in the same industry? So they don't think, you may not think of them and they may not think of you as a potential employer. So that's one sort of layer of diversity that we look at as skill diversity. But it's also critical to look at the other metrics of diversity that are available in public data to try and understand, what workforce are you recruiting and how can we target folks that have similar skills and potentially workforces that exhibit different diversity characteristics that would improve sort of our overall workforce makeup. And so, some of the measures or the axes that you might look on are on labeled on the screen here. There's also ideas of, how ready are you? That's going to be your skill similarity. Potential willingness to transition. These are certainly wages as one factor, but also sort of, do you see a workforce that resembles yourself in that new industry or at that new firm is an important criteria there. And then trying to understand how can we target multiple origin occupations to build that diverse pipeline to pick folks from a variety of different occupation pipelines that represent the diversity that we want to see either in our industry or in our firm or in our region. So then this is one example, sort of another case study from predicting sort of a demand shock and trying to understand the consequences. So we looked at kind of I would say not predicting, but the backwards look at the EV demand shock. We've seen that EV production and labor demand has largely relocated to the Southeast, and that's going to have long-term consequences for the automotive workforce in both locations, good and bad. But it's something that we're only sort of starting to understand, I would say, now. I think with artificial intelligence, we have an opportunity to try and understand some of these demand shock implications, hopefully before some of the worst effects or most dramatic effects, I should say, are felt. And so on the right-hand side, we compare on the horizontal axis, the occupation's AI exposure score. So this is a score. There's a variety of these types of scores in the literature, but this is one of them in particular that looks at, how much of my occupation can AI currently execute in a relatively reasonable way. And then trying to compare that on the y-axis to the exposure of where you might go to, the destination occupations. Let's say if you were fired from your job because AI replaced it entirely. And so what we're trying to get at here is understanding if your job is highly susceptible to, is highly exposed to AI, but all of your destination occupations are not, you may have actually a relatively strong position because while your occupation may shrink in your region or nationally, you might have many exit options that might require not an insignificant amount of reskilling. The occupations where sort of on the flip side, where your occupation and all of your competing occupations or potential destination occupations are also exposed to AI, that's really where we would want to focus from a policy perspective on understanding how we, reskill or relocate individuals or provide new opportunities for folks in that area where their occupation is sort of at threat of AI adoption, and everywhere that they have the skills to exit to is also sort of in competition with the current AI adoption. And so this is a general method in development for thinking about how do we predict these demand shocks for new technologies rather than sort of respond to them and be behind the eight ball in that process overall. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about sort of, I'll call this future work and need for future work, is thinking about sort of the wraparound supports and outcome measures for all of these analytical techniques. So we have a variety of tools and techniques that we have shown today and that I can talk more in detail and answer questions about later. for measuring the current workforce and trying to find the skills gaps between the current workforce and the future demand, trying to estimate that future demand based on technological characteristics of adoption technologies. But I think what's limited in the national data and the publicly available data is identifying those skill gaps and tying them to training and transition outcomes. So this is an area that we have some work in development, but I think there's a lot of need for improvement in general in both the academic literature and transitioning that to the workforce. I'm excited to hear others' expertise in this area. Hopefully, have solutions that I haven't seen yet. But I think there's a few problems that we've certainly identified at Valdos that we're working on and interested in finding partners who are excited about. And one is national training program data sets. So there are state data sets that come in different forms. There's a little bit of national training, particularly for WIOA funded programs. But there's not a lot of cohesive national data around training programs that might be able to fill the needs of these labor supply demand gaps that we can identify in the data. I think in particular, information that we would want to have at scale that it doesn't exist to my knowledge today is placement data for that training. Is trying to understand where do people go. I mean, ideally, how successful are they, but even just where they end up after these programs, graduation rates, placement rates, all of that type of information that's a little more available at the university, at the 4-year university level is less cohesive, I would say, across the less than 4-year degree training program. Then the other piece of this that we've actually had a study with Allegheny County DHS working on this and hopefully going to do a little bit more in this area in the coming years is how much to pay for training. How do you incentivize people to take training when you identify potentially a either technology or other demand shock to their occupations and or a labor supply sort of skills gap and you want to incentivize training? How do you do that for folks? How much, do you need to pay? What additional services do you need to provide? And then how do we map those additional services and or pay for training to outcomes in a ideally causal way, but even just in a way that we track them and can make some correlation insights to the types of wraparound services that are actually moving the needle for folks, not sort of what we necessarily just think would be required, but can we say, hey, specifically these are getting this level bump in pay is getting a 10% increase in completion rates or placement rates for a particular training program, or identifying, when a training program provides childcare or transportation to and from the training site, we get a particular measured bump in a metric of interest on outcomes, whether that's graduation rates or placement rates or wage gains in after transition. Those are the types of things that we're really interested in to help inform and justify policy changes so that we can go to policymakers and say, hey, you should pay this much. This is what's required in the market, and these are the outcome benefits that you see in that process. So this is an area I think that we're in development on and thinking a lot about, but and I'm excited to learn from others who have more experience and expertise in this area, and always open to collaboration if folks have ideas in this realm and applying some of the quantitative techniques that you've seen today seem like they might be interesting. Send us an email. We'd love to talk more.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Now I'm excited to introduce our second speaker, Brandy Merriweather. Brandy Merriweather is president of the Buffalo Urban Development Corporation, where she leads major economic development initiatives advancing Buffalo's revitalization, including workforce training, placemaking, and small business development. Her work focuses on strengthening talent pipelines, supporting minority and women-owned businesses, and driving inclusive growth across the city. Welcome, Brandy.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here to share some information about Budsy's approach to sustainability and also some highlights from one of our major transformation projects. Buffalo Urban Development Corporation is a City of Buffalo nonprofit economic development agency, and I'm going to walk through kind of our approach and how we have tackled some of the challenges I think that a lot of Rust Belt cities have seen with respect to the change in industry, vacancies, workforce, talent attraction, and those types of things. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of our major initiatives that we've been working on for the last several years is within the Northland Beltline corridor. This is a densely populated residential area that is located along a rail line and that used to have a number of thriving industries located within this geography. So Budsy purchased about 50 acres of land. These were vacant industrial properties. Some of the sites were parking lots, and some were just vacant land, all with the strategy of trying to link up workforce training, neighborhood revitalization, adaptive reuse of blighted structures and also partnerships and innovation. So we were able to team with the City of Buffalo, um, the state of New York through Empire State Development, which is the state's economic development engine, and many others to put together a strategic plan for the corridor to engage the community and to locate an anchor, which is known as the Northland Workforce Training Center, to provide training for advanced manufacturing opportunities within the city of Buffalo. One of the other things that we were also trying to account for was having ready to go space for advanced manufacturing companies. We really have a shortage in our area of move-in ready sites for advanced manufacturing. And then we also have seen, kind of a lot of the employees were beginning to retire. So we were also looking to account for that through this neighborhood strategy. Next slide, please. So people thought we were nuts when we bought all these properties. This is a before and after, or just a before photo actually, of 683 Northland, which is our building, our main building. This building houses the Workforce Training Center, which is a state-of-the-art training program. They're one of our anchor tenants, as well as several others. But this building was in pretty rough shape. It had been vacant for many, many years. There was some environmental challenges. The building is also on the historic registry, so there was also some mitigation measures we had to take from that perspective as well. Next slide. This is an after photo of the transformation. The photo on your left, or I guess my left, is a also displays a mural that we worked on with local students to also try to engage the arts community in this kind of shared vision for what we imagine for this campus. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the Northland Workforce Training Center is our main anchor. It is a facility that specializes in training, auto tech, electrical, HVAC, welding, clean energy. And one of the key aspects of the having this anchor was to also attract manufacturing companies to co-locate within this area to really help with that placement pipeline following graduation. The Northland Central building now is home to a variety of tenants. So the Workforce Training Center is our anchor tenant. We now have Rodriguez Construction, which is a local minority-owned construction company that is located within Northland Central. So there's a lot of synergy there. Buffalo Manufacturing Works specializes in innovation. They do a lot of work for the federal government as well. So having them on campus, just from an innovation perspective, has been awesome. There's also been a lot of thought and consideration for other wraparound services that we think will not only benefit the students coming out of the program, but that also benefit the general community. Because, as I mentioned, this development is located within a residential neighborhood. We really wanted to make sure that the surrounding community could also benefit and or participate in this massive investment that was happening in the area. So Bank on Buffalo is located there. They do a lot of work with students for uh, financial information and really helping people to make sure that they're making wise investments and talking through things of that nature. We also have a culinary training program on campus, and that program is another just incredible piece or aspect to the project. We have a local minority-owned food service operator there as well, and many others. So I could go on and on, but Northland Central was really that key, completing that and having the Workforce Training Center located there. And working in collaboration with so many awesome partners has really helped to solidify and anchor the campus. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the spin-off development that has happened just through all of those partnerships and that kind of shared vision from a city, state, public, and private sector perspective. Next slide. So we are now entering into phase three and phase four. So Northland Central was our first phase. There was also some other buildings that were attached to the Northland Central property that were redeveloped. We did some infrastructure improvements in collaboration with the city, and then also some green infrastructure and kind of park improvements in the surrounding area as well. So after completing phase one and phase two, um, we teamed with the state. We were awarded $55 million to kind of further the vision of the campus. As I mentioned, when we initially got involved with this whole corridor redevelopment plan, we purchased several parcels because we really saw this as a place-based ecosystem for training, for manufacturing companies, and also for innovation. We also competed in the Build Back Better Challenge, and we were awarded $14.4 million for our region, which was huge for us and really spoke to just the vision, the buy-in, and the value add to taking this type of approach to workforce development and teaming with so many partners and also incorporating neighborhood redevelopment aspects to it. National Grid, which is our local electrical utility company, is also a partner on this. And then we also used brownfield tax credits and also historic tax credits. So I'll talk a little bit about phase three and phase four in our next slide. Thank you. So this is just kind of an area map. So in the blue, that is phase three. So we have several projects that are going to be underway. Those include bringing on about 50,000 square feet of advanced manufacturing space. We are also working on a community solar project. We'll have ground mount solar that is going onto the site where we will generate energy and then be able to pass some of the savings of that energy generation to residents that are located within the corridor as well. So when we were approaching this project, because it is in a residential area, and we work so closely with the residents, the block clubs, the stakeholders. We really wanted to constantly be looking for ways that the neighborhood could also benefit from all of the activity that's happening on campus. 631 Northland is in the green. That is a 40,000 square foot facility. We just broke ground on that. So that's under construction, and everything in blue is also under construction as well. And that's in addition to the completed projects that we've done at 631 Northland. And then to the right of your screen, you'll see 741. We have some plans to demolish this particular property. It has fallen into disrepair, and a storm in 2022 pretty much sealed the deal on our ability to be able to rehabilitate it. But that is a site that we're working on to get it ready to be a new construction development site. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just talks a little bit about the community solar project. This is something the community has been really, really thrilled about. So again, making sure that we're focusing on sustainability from a variety of different lenses. Connecting with students through the Workforce Training Center and the work that their organization does, providing wraparound services, innovation, right there on campus, and then also generating additional benefits for the surrounding residents and community. Next slide. One of the other key pieces that we've really been focused on when we talk about kind of ecosystem, we've worked with the Department of State to get the area designated as a brownfield opportunity area, which will unlock additional opportunities for pre-development work and other grant and funding opportunities for, organizations outside of BUD/C. So, BUD/C has been really focused on this, and we are knee deep in the throes of development, but we really wanted to also unlock other development opportunities for small businesses or surrounding property owners. Maybe they're residents who've lived in the neighborhood a long time who own, small scale commercial buildings that they would also like to see redeveloped. We work very closely with our Northland Corridor Advisory Committee members. They're made up of residents, block clubs, community members, other manufacturing companies. It really helps us to keep our awareness of, what some of the needs are from a manufacturing perspective, and also what some of those wraparound services that we should be considering for the campus. We also recently entered into a land sale agreement with a daycare operator who's also looking to bring a residential mixed use project and a daycare facility. That's been something that we've heard repeatedly from, the folks that operate the Workforce Training Center and the students as an amenity that would really help to support their efforts in completing their training. So Northland has really become a industry-driven public-private community collaboration that, obviously is anchored around training and workforce, but also has had the ability to leverage all types of other opportunities that create more of an ecosystem for people to be able to thrive. And that also benefits residents of a neighborhood that have always been there and have wanted to see it transform. One of the things, just as a personal note, I actually grew up on Northland Avenue. So to be a part of something like this, as an adult and as an economic development professional has just been, it's really incredible. I can't describe how awesome it feels. So, we're really encouraged by the amount of support that we've received, from funders and also just industry leaders. Next slide, please. And I'm going to just touch on two other aspects of workforce and sustainability. One of the other things we constantly hear from the workforce and from companies looking to attract people to Buffalo has a lot to do with Buffalo's sense of place and creating a strong downtown community. So this has been something else that we've really been focused on through our Race for Place initiative, trying to create through placemaking, infrastructure improvements, bringing amenities and things that people want to see as a way to make it easier for companies looking to locate in Buffalo to attract the talent that they need. Next slide, please. So through a variety of initiatives, we do temporary placemaking improvements. We are really focused around walkability, supporting small businesses, bringing programming and things for entrepreneurs as well that are interested in being in Buffalo and trying to create more of an ecosystem that lends itself to a better way for us to be able to attract and retain talent. Next slide. And then again, continuing on that sustainability front, we also are working with the City of Buffalo and the Ralph Wilson Foundation on the revitalization of a 90-acre waterfront park. This is again through our stakeholder engagement. These are the types of amenities that people want to see when they're considering where they're going to locate. We also worked very closely with the Great Lakes Commission on making sure that shoreline was sustainable and the surrounding community had access to this over $100 million park. It's going to have state-of-the-art playgrounds, sports fields, trails, a pedestrian bridge, and it's really, again, like I said, centered around the community and a way for Buffalo to elevate itself with respect to our ability to attract and maintain talent. Next slide. So that's just a few of the highlights of the things that we're working on in Buffalo. I know there's probably people who are like, Brandy, how does this all connect? So, we really try to approach sustainability in a comprehensive way, and we try to integrate that workforce and talent attraction and sustainable communities and residential neighborhood development. We try to incorporate that into everything that we do so that we're making sure that we're providing economic sustainability, training and education, support for small businesses, and also looking at sustainability from a placemaking and infrastructure perspective. So, walkability, clean energy, things of that nature. So that's my time. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you very much, Brandy. Next, I'm proud to introduce our third speaker, Anna Yocum. Anna is the Director of Workforce Development for Western PA NECA, where she leads initiatives connecting industry, education, and community partners to expand pathways into skilled trades careers. She also leads Powering Pittsburgh, helping raise awareness of the electrical construction industry and its role in powering the region's infrastructure and economy. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Any opportunity to talk about workforce development is what I'm signing up for. So, my name is Anna Yocum. As mentioned, I am the Director of Workforce Development with the National Electrical Contractors Association in Western Pennsylvania. Today, my focus is really on the workforce challenges we're seeing at the local level. A lot of this is consistent with what's going on nationally, but I really wanted to hone in on what's going on at home for us and then kind of walk through those pressures and how NECA is starting to tackle what we're doing so that we can build a pipeline for our workforce that is sustainable and will actually work for decades to come. So we're not in this situation again, in a few years. Thank you. I wanted to give a little bit of context of who I was, just so you could get an understanding of my background in workforce development. I actually came into the trade association world in 2018, fresh out of college. I had no idea it existed, which is funny because my dad is an electrician. He had, preached that college was my pathway, so I followed that for myself, and I ended up coming into the construction industry. But I have 8 years of experience leading workforce development in a variety of different areas. I actually just recently came from the national team that was overseeing the electrical trade association world, and I found my way to Western Pennsylvania last fall. And I have my master's degree in organizational development and leadership. That is important because I had a very unique opportunity to write my thesis on the construction workforce during COVID. So I got to see a booming construction industry hit a major, major crisis, and then how it kind of bounced back after that, all while researching what workforce development was happening, boots on the ground with contractors. My combination of workforce development and my research focus has really given me a unique opportunity and understanding to see where contractors are hurting, and then also take that perspective of people who want positions in the industry, whether it's in the field or in the office capacity, but how do we align them better and make sure that everybody's successful? So, what really matters today is, why does this matter to our community? Why does understanding what's going on with the workforce matter? And the biggest point that I can put, in front of you today is that our workforce is under extreme pressure. It has been building for a very long time. And now with this technology boom, AI boom, all these data centers coming up, it is under increasing pressure. And on top of that, we're seeing shortages that are just, coming in bigger waves than we were anticipating. So across Western Pennsylvania, the shortages are creating real challenges on projects. There's delays in projects, rising costs in a variety of different ways. So supply chain issues, incentive pay for workers to get them to come to job sites to make sure that they want to show up. Right now, they have, the world in their hands. They have so much opportunity, and we are desperately trying to get them to show up reliably for these projects so that we can keep them moving. And then there's growing limitations on how quickly we can get things done. Training takes time. I'll talk about kind of the training structure in a few slides, but it can't be rushed, especially in construction. These projects, when contractors are out there, when field workers are out there, their lives are at stake when they're working with high voltage, when they're working with different systems. But then on top of that, they need to make sure these systems are operating functionally so that by the time they're leaving the project, everybody else who's using it will be safe. So putting that pressure cooker in place with speeding up training is not an option. And we have to find more creative ways to work together to kind of not get around it, but find solutions for it. And while the impacts are really visible on job sites right now, especially with the delays going on, the influence is long term. So when we're having issues on these job sites, it can kind of overflow into the community. You can see communities start to struggle a little bit with workforce. Historically, I know that when they're struggling to find a workforce, they will bring people in, and then those people will leave and go back to their homes. What we really want and what we would love to see happen in our community is finding more ways for our people to work and play in the same place. And Brandy had some great representation of ways that they're doing it in Buffalo and how they're keeping people home and making sure that it's a good opportunity for them. And that's something that we've been focusing on. So, the main pressures that are driving our industry right now, especially with our workforce shortages, is demand and demographics. First, we have an aging workforce and an ongoing wave of retirements. This reduces the workforce capacity and it really limits mentorship in the industry. something that we're seeing right now is that there's a lack of tribal knowledge being passed on. And it's because people are retiring quickly and they didn't get those opportunities to train their replacements, or people are moving up into leadership positions when they didn't necessarily have that time to build the experience that they needed under their belt. And that's really causing fractures in the industry. The second part of it is that training takes time. As I mentioned, it historically with apprenticeships in the field, they're time-based because you get muscle memory behind it. You need to have that repetition under your belt. We're starting to see changes now with it being more competency-based, where it's if you show you can do this, then yes, you can move on. But realistically speaking, a lot of the program structures that have been built in the past are time-based, and they need time to cultivate the skill sets and the experience needed to either step into a higher leadership position in the field or then make a transition somewhere into the office. But the hands-on training can't be accelerated or scaled quickly. And that right now is really where we're seeing struggles. I know from, boots on the ground in Pittsburgh right now, there's a ton of interest in the industry. I work with the Local 5 International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and they're doing intakes for apprenticeship applicants constantly. There is a lot of interest in it. Right now, we just don't have the capacity to place everybody. So what we're trying to do is find unique ways to help people pivot. If you have a skill set that might have transferable skills somewhere else, how can we connect you directly with a contractor? Are you willing to wait a couple months before we can get you in the training program? And then on the back end, what can we do to help make sure we can, build this capacity? But as mentioned earlier, there's some fear being, a Rust Belt area. What happens if the boom doesn't keep booming? Are we going to be hurting again? If we take too many people, what does that mean? Are we going to displace jobs later on? So we're really trying to figure out what is it going to look like long term with this AI and data center boom? Is it going to consistently stay where it is? And how do we keep training for this demand that we need right now and transition to maybe when that demand slows down a little bit? But the bottom line is that the demand for projects is growing far faster than workforce readiness, and it's been on that trajectory for a couple years now, and we just are not where we need to be with getting our people trained up to the positions and the caliber that they need to be. So something that's important to understand about construction, and again, I mentioned I came into this industry not knowing this at all. It's taken me a few years to really understand why things are the way they are. The way the construction industry, especially the electrical industry, was designed is that the pipeline was always field experience, then move into office or leadership positions. Part of the reason that it was built that way was because the belief that you won't understand what business and office leadership decisions to make if you don't understand how it operates in the field, which is very true. You do need to have a firm understanding of what's going on in the field to be able to support decision making when you're not in the field. But the progression that used to work is under pressure now because we don't have enough people in the field, which means we don't have enough people gaining experience and we don't have enough people pivoting into those office and leadership roles. And it doesn't mean that we can't take people with no field experience and put them in the office. It just means that there's this lack of training and experience in that middle area that we need to pay a little bit more attention to. So the system worked when we had a steady flow of people entering and moving through it. But as you can see, that's not necessarily the case right now. So that is creating a lot of pressure on contractors, on project owners, on communities that are looking for all of these great developments to happen. It just creates this pressure cooker that's really hard to take steps out of. So what's changed? New workers are entering, but the demand is outpacing the readiness that I mentioned earlier. So we do have a ton of interest, but the demand is much higher than the rate that we're able to train them. Awareness and perception limit early exposure. I will touch on this in a little bit, but one of the things that we're seeing is people don't necessarily understand what the construction industry is. That's part of the reason we developed Powering Pittsburgh, to help them understand what contractors do, what the careers look like in the industry, and help people understand sooner so that they're not feeling strapped mid-career, wanting to make a change, but that they have all the information earlier on to make informed decisions on what they think is the best role for them. And then the experience, training capacity limits how quickly skills can develop. So, as I mentioned before, they need time, especially in the construction industry. Learning something new, working with your hands, it's awkward. Sometimes you need that repetition under your belt, and you need to see other opportunities happen. Construction sites are very structured, but there are always unknowns that are going to happen. The more experiences you have with a trained professional or mentor by your side to walk you through a situation that might have been unplanned, to say, this is how we're going to handle it, or this is how we handled it last time this happened, so that you can learn those things that aren't going to be in a textbook. Those are critical, and you do not get them without time, and you don't get them without mentorship. So that is the main piece of this that's making it really difficult to move forward and just get a flood of people into the construction industry. There's fewer experienced workers available to mentor. That's a very critical piece of this. We know that we have great minds getting ready to retire. Actually, the alarming statistic is that we need about 100,000 electrical workers in 2026 alone to replace the wave of retirees and to bring on just, that the regular flow of workers into the industry. So that is a mass amount of people who we need to have mentorship and training at the same time, and we just don't have the people. And the last part of this is that the office and leadership roles are harder to fill without experienced candidates. Regardless of if they're coming from the field or coming from a different avenue, they need to have some capacity of experience, and that pool is getting smaller and smaller, which is creating training gaps essentially, because we're putting people in leadership positions that might not have had the experience needed to mentor the people on their teams, or coming behind them to replace them in a few years. So more transitions are happening, and we're getting more reactive, and we need to kind of shift back into being proactive. I know this is all alarming. I tried to look at this as opportunity. So now that I've set the stage for kind of what's going wrong and where we got ourselves into this pickle, my next couple of slides are the more positive, what we can do to help walk ourselves out of this situation. So locally, how we're responding to the tight pool of people in the workforce is we're starting earlier. Unfortunately, even if we found 100,000 people to come into the industry tomorrow, we would still be having issues with training. So one of the things that we have sat down as a team and focused on with the, NECA and the IBW is, how do we attract people sooner and help get them some baseline of understanding, so that by the time 5, 10 years down the road, when we're still going to need people, we have people who have some understanding of the industry and where they fit into the equation. So we're starting earlier. Students need exposure about careers so that they know what to even consider. I know I have a 2-year-old son. His daycare is already talking about, like, what does my mom do? What does my dad do? And it's doctors and, nurses and teachers. Those are really the things that they know coming up, but they don't understand the intricacies of a virtual design engineer or somebody who works specifically on the power grid. They don't know those things, and they're so little at that point. We need to find ways to kind of incorporate it into education without it being totally overwhelming to them. Second, we're working to better connect education to the industry so that the learning going on in the classroom actually reflects a real life work environment. And the reason that this is very critical for us right now is that we have had so many people come into the industry who have said, I took this class, I did this, I did that, and it isn't necessarily applicable to what they would be doing either on the job site or in the office. And then we have to take more time to train them. So we are trying to get ahead of that by working with different career and tech centers, vocational schools, different training and partnership opportunities to make sure that people have a real life understanding of my textbook might say this, but this is really what it could be like. And then also introducing them to contractors and employers a little bit early, whether it's through networking or just having contractors talk about cool projects that they've worked on. And then third, we're being much more intentional about how we plan the pipeline. Like I said, even if we had a flood of 100,000 people tomorrow, we still need a pipeline down the road. We're always going to need people in construction. Things need renovated, things need rebuilt, things need modernized. We're always going to need that workforce. So if we're not planning for it, we just keep getting back in this cycle of being reactive. And one of the things that we really want to make sure is that as we continue to grow, we have enough people coming in that we can continue to move up and mentor, and create that leadership pipeline instead of getting in situations where we're moving people around for the sake of filling roles because they're open. And locally, this is really where the rubber meets the road. We have partnered with a variety of different organizations and we've started our own programs to really help make sure that these practices are going into fruition and that we're really doing what we need to do in the community. So the strategy in real life for starting earlier looks like creating opportunity. We partnered with Junior Achievement BizTown to open up a storefront. For those of you who aren't aware what BizTown is, it creates career simulations for students to essentially see how a town operates. There's financial literacy involved. Students are different positions in the organization, all the way from a field worker to a CEO of an organization, and they understand how they link together. One of the reasons that we wanted to get involved in that is because there's a lot of misconceptions about what construction is, especially electrical. A lot of people just think, light bulbs and light switches, but it is a lot more than that. I was at Junior Achievement a few weeks ago, and I told some of the students, I bet you didn't know that IBW electricians are the ones who do the New Year's Eve ball drop in New York City. That's some of the stuff our contractors and our field workers are doing. Those are the cool projects, that they are working on around the city and around the, different communities, and giving them that opportunity and exposure to just go home and start having conversations early, even though they're not going to be in the workforce for another decade or so, are things that haven't been happening, and we want that to happen on a larger scale. Another initiative we have is Camp NAWIC, which is run by the National Association of Women in Construction. This was created to help young students explore skilled trades, not just electrical, but multi-trade, through immersive experiences led by women in the industry. So women are not historically the bulk makeup of the construction industry. This was created to put a spotlight on strong leaders and strong women who are leading these projects, leading teams, leading different efforts to have diversity of thought in the industry. These programs don't only increase career awareness, but they help broaden perceptions of who belongs in the fields and what opportunities exist. On the connection to the industry, NECA works very hard for our contractors to represent their needs through legislative advocacy, education programming, filling in gaps. And actually through NECA, the Next Leadership Academy was developed specifically to fill training gaps that contractors are feeling. So there's several different pathways that our contractors have said they're having struggles training in. We've created different training opportunities for them to do online, or they can do immersive in-person experiences to help kind of fill those voids. And then lastly, planning the pipeline. Powering Pittsburgh is all things exposure, awareness, just feel good. Like, we power the city and we're proud of it. We're proud of our people. We're proud of our projects. we want to make sure that community partners, educators, career seekers understand what goes on in this industry and how they fit into it, and then the impact that it has in the community. And I know we're getting short on time, so I'll wrap it up with some of my final thoughts here. The main thing I wanted to pull in for this conversation, my main audience is typically contractors, so this is a new group for me. What does this mean for the region? What does it mean for the community members here? At the end of the day, building a stronger workforce requires coordinated action. It's not just one-offs here and there. So we need to really work on early awareness and partnering together for sustainable efforts that are going to help build out the community, coordinating workforce and economic development strategies, expanding career exploration and alignment, all of those things that we can do together to make sure that we're not just doing one-off efforts to build out the workforce. And then I have one more slide. The biggest component of workforce development that is often overlooked is that it is regional development. Your people and your community are the strength of what your region is. And the more you can impact the people in your area, the stronger you're going to have that drive for people to want to be here working. So at the end of the day, it's much more about filling jobs. It's about, impacting infrastructure, economic growth, education systems, long-term community resilience. If we want to have stronger regional outcomes, we need to think earlier, partner better, and plan a little bit further ahead so that we're not just being reactive in all of our efforts. But this is a fixable thing. It just takes a little bit more coordination and a little bit more awareness about what is going on in the industry and how we can work together to solve it.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Brandy and Patrick. Panelists, if you don't mind turning your cameras back on and join me on screen, and we will do a brief Q&A session today. Once again, if you have a question for the Sustainable Pittsburgh team or any of our speakers here today, please put your questions in the Q&A box. So our first question was asked during Patrick's presentation. Perhaps you'll be able to answer it. What are corporations slash manufacturers doing to entice a new workforce wave to join their team?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I mean, I think the other panelists gave some indications of these levers that are available to firms, to organizations, to communities. I think the tough answer is that it really depends. I mean, obviously, wages are a major lever, maybe the primary lever that folks have. But to Anna's just one of her most recent points, a lot of it is education and outreach and helping people understand sort of what jobs are available. And there's the dark, dirty, and dangerous adage around manufacturing, and I think helping folks understand that that's not always the modern picture for these types of jobs or organizations, and that things particularly in the advanced manufacturing sector, often touch elements of new technology that people are excited about, and you just have to help them understand that and see that. And so I think there's a nuts and bolts sort of wage and quality of life element, but I think there is a big part of it that is helping people understand what the work actually look like and entails, and what the career trajectories look like, has been lagging in a lot of industries for incentivizing people to at least consider them as options. But maybe other panelists have other answers to that question in more detail in their experience.
All right, yeah, thank you. The next question we have is directed to Brandy. Was remediation done on the industrial properties prior to your acquisition? And I know you spoke to that a little bit, but perhaps you would like to expand upon that.
It was not done. We actually, through our nonprofit status, we were able to work on some of that remediation. And then for the Northland Central project, we actually created some for-profit entities so that we could take advantage of historic and brownfield and new market tax credits.
All right, thank you. The next question is coming for Anna, and it's coming from someone who works with the Energy Efficiency Alliance here in Pennsylvania. And they manage a resource hub for contractors called the PA Contractor Network. Their goal is to help contractors grow their skills and ultimately their business. From your perspective at NECA, what are contractors telling you are their biggest pain points? And how can networks like theirs provide them valuable educational resources under increased pressure and time constraints?
So the biggest pain point, which was really the underlying part of my presentation, is people. We just don't have enough people, and our contractors are kind of in this pickle of, I'm afraid to bid projects without people, but I need to bid projects to get people type of situation. It's a very big chicken or egg. It's a super frustrating one. Once somebody figures it out, tell me, and I'll be a happy person. But one of the issues is just people in general and a lack of awareness. As Patrick just said, and he mentioned this earlier in his presentation, there are transferable skills, and people just don't know what opportunities are out there for them to transfer their skills. So, creating any opportunities to help link up, this was my past position, or here are some things that I'm really good at. Would I be good at X, Y, or Z career is something that our contractors struggle with. And I would say another area, which I don't know that they would love me saying this, it's just standard operating procedures around the flow of getting people in, training them, identifying when they need people in a timely manner, things like that. So they're really looking for resources to help them manage this process and figure out where they can take someone with this skill set and put them in an area where they have an opening.
Thank you. This next question is a bit more kind of broadly focused. So, are there opportunities for disconnected workers or folks who have had barriers to employment to connect to the construction job training pipeline down?
I can jump in on this since I'm unmuted. Yes, there absolutely are. A lot of the times, if there's been gaps in employment or there's been situations where you might have some barriers, it'll be a one-off situation where you have to have a conversation. In construction, there are different clearances our contractors require for different job sites. So if you are unable to meet those clearances for those job sites, that's probably not the best fit for you, but it doesn't mean that there's not another place for you to go. A lot of it is just getting you connected with the right person to talk to help get you through that. And then going back to what I said earlier, one of the things we're trying to get away from is just having to find someone to talk to. We're trying to provide those resources. So through Powering Pittsburgh, we're trying to create avenues for people who are looking for those opportunities to see where they need to go to start taking those next steps. But I would say, without knowing the exact situation, yes, there are. It just might take a little more conversation and trying to figure out what specific opportunities are out there for that exact person.
Thank you. And then the last question we have here is, have you seen any good examples of post-placement wraparound supports that have improved worker outcomes? How significant do you think those could be for longer term outcomes, since keeping a job can be harder than getting one?
I'll jump in here, John. Um, Based on a lot of our collaborations and insights from the Workforce Training Center, having those mentorship opportunities, having opportunities for, I know the Workforce Training Center at times provides resources for things like transportation. That's been, a big hurdle for us here locally. A lot of the larger companies oftentimes are located in suburban areas that don't have a ton of options for transportation, which was another big reason we really wanted to make sure that we were creating a ecosystem in the center of Buffalo that had multiple ways that you can access the sites and things of that nature. And then obviously we're still working to try to bring on some additional childcare opportunities. There's a few miles before there's a childcare facility in and around the campus. So we're working with Lighthouse Incorporated to bring some of those amenities to campus. Those are the two that are jumping out. I'm sure there's more, but those are the main ones for me that are jumping out.
I
All
would
right,
also echo that transportation is a very big challenge. Western PA NECA works with IBW Local 5 in Pittsburgh, Local 56 in Erie, and Local 712 in Beaver. And all of those have different projects going on. And we're not trying to be in the business of moving people away from their families when they're working on projects, unless that's something that they want. But we're hearing more and more, and with this new wave of workforce wanting to be home for soccer games, at plays, and dinner with their families, or, just to have a social life in general, helping provide transportation and finding solutions for those far off job sites is something that is frustrating, but is necessary to make sure that we have a workforce in place. And then childcare is always something on our minds of trying to figure out how do we tackle providing childcare because construction sites are open early, and most childcare facilities are not open as early as our field workers need to get onto the site. And even so, it might not be in the direction of the job site they're going to for a year. So we're looking into those as well, and those typically are the main things that people are bringing up when they're talking about concerns or barriers, different struggles that they're having in the industry. And if there's support for that, they would be much more likely to find a position with, a contractor in the field.
right, thank you. Next slide, please. So here are some upcoming events that we have with Sustainable Pittsburgh and our partners as well. May 13th, we have a Pittsburgh Area Sustainability Social coffee chat hosted by University of Pittsburgh. On May 21st, we'll have a Spring Sustainability Social hosted again by Sustainable Pittsburgh, Mascaro Center for Sustainable Innovation. And then on August 4th, we will have our next Policy Connection. And you can find these events and more at sustainablepittsburgh.org/events. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, speakers, again, for giving your time and expertise on this a very important question and topic today. And for the participants, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. We'll circulate the resources shared today, and we hope you'll reach out to us if you have any questions or want to learn more about opportunities to advance sustainability within our municipalities and organizations. Thank you all.
Thank you.